are officially just a few days away from the release of Two Blue Vortex 8th chapter, which means we've hit the part of the month where the Boruto community has had access to the same amount of information for too long. But in a strange way, this is my favorite part of every single month, because it's around this time of month that we get the truly great theories. When the Boruto community has had 3 to 3.5 weeks to sit on the same chapter and speculate about all the information we have from Boruto up until this point, the truly great minds in the Boruto community get to doing their greatest thinking. And boy oh boy, have they been thinking. See, when I got back from vacation, I had over 400 emails sitting in my inbox. And since there's a possibility that in every single one of these emails there's a fantastic theory or a good video idea, I read every single one of those emails. I don't know if I should be telling you this, but yes, I read every email I get. Now, if the email opens with,
"Hello, Nick, have theory for you. Is Shibai boy kisser, question mark?"
then I'm gonna read about 3 words of it and move on to the next one. And also, if your email is over 100 words, there's a fair chance I don't read it at all. And from those 400 emails I received, there was about 6 usable video ideas, which is a pretty consistent hit rate. However, it wasn't until today, yes, after I'd already gone through those 400 vacation emails, that I got an email that made me want to crack into a video immediately. To get into all that today, we gotta talk about my favorite recurring sponsor to the page, BetterHelp. Listen, I'm a big fan of anything I sponsor on this page, but out of all the things that I've sponsored on this page, nothing has played a bigger role in my life than BetterHelp. There's been times in my life that I've dealt with serious bouts of depression, mostly tied into the fact that my social media isn't popping off quite like it used to. However, because of BetterHelp, I was able to get connected with a therapist in under 48 hours after listing the problems that I was having, and the therapist that I was connected to was tailored to the problems that I was having. They helped me establish positive feedback loops and daily affirmations to help myself realize that I'm a lot more than my social media presence. And BetterHelp is offering you an experience similar to mine. See, we all have individual struggles, and BetterHelp wants to help you with those individual struggles. So simply by filling out your information and telling BetterHelp what's ailing you, BetterHelp is able to, most of the time, get you connected with a therapist within 48 hours. And the reason they're able to do this is because BetterHelp has a network of thousands of licensed mental health professionals that can help you with what's ever going on in your life. Which means, even if you're not exactly vibing with a therapist that you get connected to with first, you can switch to a new therapist at no extra cost and with no hassle. And since BetterHelp is committed to the whole no hassle strategy, you can also communicate with your therapist in a myriad of different ways tailored to your enjoyment. Be that phone calls, video calling, or even just exchanging messages. All to make sure you're as comfortable as possible when consulting with your therapist. And to get access to this incredible network of therapists, all you have to do is use my link, betterhelp.com/nchammer, and fill out a questionnaire, and boom, you'll be matched with a professional with years of experience dealing with the problems you're having. It's the easiest possible way to get connected with a therapist today. So go ahead, go to betterhelp.com/nchammer23, or use the link in my description to get started with your BetterHelp account today. And if you use my link to sign up for BetterHelp today, you'll receive a special discount on your first month. So what are we waiting for? Let's start prioritizing the important things. See, on this page, and pretty much any other page that talks about Boruto, we've been speculating for a long time that Boruto is somehow attached to Shibai. And if I seem a little jazzed today, I just did an ad read for G Fuel, and my god, what are they putting in this stuff? I can see through the cosmos. I feel like Matthew McConaughey at the end of Interstellar. Give me the books. If anything's gonna become evident through the filming of this video, it's that I don't drink energy drinks. For pretty obvious reasons I wasn't allowed to as a child. And there is a lot of evidence to substantiate the claim that somehow Boruto is connected to Shibai. There's the fact that Boruto, in his Boroshiki form, doesn't grow a horn that resembles Momoshiki's, either in his pre-fused or post-fused forms. And instead, the horn that Boroshiki does grow is eerily reminiscent of Shibai's horns. And while it's not a one-to-one match in any capacity, the horn that Boroshiki does grow bears much more similarity to Shibai's than Momoshiki's. And since we know from Kawaki and his karma mode that when you fully activate your karma marking, you should grow the horn of the Otsutsuki whose karma marking you are tapping into. So Boruto not growing a one-to-one horn of Momoshiki is a bit weird. And while a cosmetic similarity between Boroshiki's horns and Shibai's horns isn't enough to unequivocally say that Boruto and Shibai are connected, there have been other, more compelling pieces of evidence that draw a connection between the two. Like the fact that Rasengan Uzuhiko, when activated, looks eerily similar to the wisps of wind or chakra that we've seen swirling around Shibai when he's using his powers. More specifically, Boruto, when activating Rasengan Uzuhiko, looks similar to what we see from Shibai when Shinjutsu are being explained by Momoshiki. On top of this, rather obviously, Boruto is the only other person in history to have a Jogan outside of Shibai, and that is supposedly why Momoshiki is so interested in Boruto. And thus, because of all of these connections tying Boruto to Shibai, we recently theorized that Boruto would die at the hands of Kawaki again, but this time he wouldn't be brought back by Momoshiki. Instead, this time he would be brought back by Shibai, in much in the same way as he was after he was revived by Momoshiki. Being revived by Shibai would awaken Shibai's powers within Boruto, and thus either Boruto, after being killed by Kawaki, would become the final villain of Boruto as a vessel for Shibai that Kawaki, Naruto, Sasuke, and the rest of Konoha would have to defeat, or being revived by Shibai would give Boruto access to Shibai's powers, and Boruto would be able to use those powers to battle against presumably the astral body of Shibai. However, when we were making that theory video, the only real issue we ran into was drawing the connection of how Boruto and Shibai ever became interlinked. Because of course, we can sit here and say, well, Boruto looks like Shibai in his Borushiki form, and therefore, they must be linked somehow. During the filming of that video, I had no real answer to answer the question of how Boruto and Shibai did become connected in the first place. And just like my 5th grade math teacher handing me back a failing test because I cheated my way through it by looking at the answers of the person to the right of me, an answer to a question without showing the work of how we got that answer is worth nothing. Now, in that video where we talked about Boruto's supposed death at the hands of Kawaki, we speculated that somehow Amado was able to get access to a pregnant Hinata and injected Shibai's DNA into said pregnant Hinata, and therefore that DNA and that chakra made its way into the infant Boruto, and thus he was born with a connection to Shibai, which would make sense because Boruto, for some reason rather blatantly, when Amado is explaining how his daughter died 12 years ago, says, oh, that's around the time that I was born, and therefore people speculate that there's somehow a connection between Amado's dead daughter and the birth of Boruto, and this is also loosely speculated to be around the time that Ada and Daemon were cyborgerized, which means, since they inherited the Shinjutsu of Shibai, that this is also around the time that Amado got access to Shibai's body, presumably from Ishiki, that somehow Amado getting his hands on Shibai's body is tangentially connected to Boruto's birth. But this theory, or I guess I should say the answer to this theory, seems somewhat unlikely. See, while it's technically possible that Amado could have disguised himself as a doctor and gotten access to a pregnant Hinata and given her what she assumed was some kind of booster shot to help her with a pregnancy that was actually Shibai's DNA, narratively it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and this being the answer to how Boruto and Shibai are connected doesn't really move the plot forward at all. And therefore, while it does answer the question of how these two could have become interlinked, it does it in a way that's not tied to anything else, which is known as lazy writing. And thus, in that video we filmed a couple days ago, I simply said we don't have enough information to draw a connection between the two. But I might have been wrong, because the email I received today not only showed us that we do have enough information to tie a connection between the two, but we might actually have enough information to confirm the connection between the two. And like with so many other theories, the truth lies behind the door marked Kaguya. Yes, that's right. Today we're talking about Kaguya, and more specifically about how her history ties Boruto to Shibai. And let me tell you right now, while I love all my theories and all my answers to possible lingering questions in Boruto, there exists an echelon of theories that I believe stand above the rest. Theories I believe to be 100% accurate, and usually they are. And boy oh boy, does this theory fall into that echelon. Because if Boruto and Shibai are truly connected, and it's not through the path that we're going to be exploring today, then I know nothing about Boruto. Because today, we're talking Boruto is Kaguya's reincarnation. But before we get to talking about anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And while you're at it, if you're feeling particularly generous, go ahead and follow my other YouTube channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. And if you just like the idea of me talking about anime and manga, then you're gonna love my podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you just want to look like somebody who keeps up with all things anime and manga, go ahead and meander on over into my merch store, otakusanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime handmade t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. I know what you're all saying.
Nick, every video ties into Kaguya somehow.
And yeah, you're right. All roads do lead back to Kaguya, but she's literally the mother of the modern ninja, so that kind of thing tends to happen. And sure, in response to that, you can say, but in Boruto, everything has had a grand total of nothing to do with Kaguya. And you'd kind of be right. And technically, in Boruto, anytime the Kaguya has ever been brought up was just to retcon everything that she either told us or we learned about her in Naruto and Naruto Shippuden. But this time, I got a real good feeling. Because while sure, technically all of Boruto has nothing to do with Kaguya, and every time she's brought up, it's to change something we know about her, but her impact is still felt universally in the Boruto world. See, as we all know, the story that we received about Kaguya, about her journey to Earth, it no longer really stands up in court. That is to say that the story that Kaguya gave us about her being from an alien race that goes from planet to planet looking for planets that divine tree seeds landed on and grew a divine tree so they could consume the chakra fruit and become stronger wasn't entirely accurate, and therefore is kind of widely considered by the Naruto fandom to be retconned. It's never actually officially been retconned. But the information that we've been given in Boruto does directly contradict everything we learned from Kaguya, which leads us to really only one possible conclusion: that she was lying. But why? Why would she lie? Well, most likely to paint herself as a hero, because the reality of what Kaguya did and how she came to Earth is a bit bleaker. See, Kaguya came to the Earth with Ishiki to destroy it, and then she kind of failed in destroying it and then just decided to rule over it because she needed to build an army of White Zetsu soldiers who she could use to battle against the race of aliens she just betrayed by killing Ishiki, and thus she needed the Earth on her side so she could rule over the Earth as the Rabbit Princess. And thus, since the information given to us by Kaguya has not been officially retconned, all we can do as a fan base is take the information given to us by Kaguya and the information given to us by Boruto and try and draw a connection between the two using my favorite thing on Earth, in-universe knowledge. And apparently whatever crack they put in this, because my God, could I run a marathon right now? They're not even paying me to say this. And they paid me for the pre-roll, but they're not paying me for this. But connecting the information that Kaguya gave us and the information that Boruto has given us is most likely what Kishimoto is building towards. And it's why the information that Kaguya has given us hasn't been officially retconned yet, because retconning things is kind of a bad look. But connecting two pieces of information that seem detached using sneaky little methods is fantastic writing. And thus, the conventionally agreed upon fan connection behind Kaguya's ascendance to power and her rule as the Rabbit Princess is that her and Ishiki made their way to Earth in order to make a divine tree and therefore a chakra fruit out of Earth, because that's where Shibai's body was. Because, as it was somewhat blatantly painted out for us in Boruto, a chakra fruit made from a planet collects the chakra and power of all things living and dead. And while that inclusion wasn't specifically made to reference Shibai's body, the insinuation is rather obvious. And Kaguya, lusting after the power of Shibai's body being sucked into the chakra fruit, decided to jump Ishiki. But since she wasn't able to fully kill Ishiki, she just took his legs and fed it to the 10 tails that they brought, creating the malformed, smaller divine tree that we see in Shippuden. The tree that Kaguya supposedly said existed before she got there. And that divine tree would create a chakra fruit that Kaguya supposedly ate after her husband found out about her true power. Chakra fruit that allowed her to awaken the Rinne Sharingan and cast Infinite Tsukiyomi. The first time. However, there's always been one weird thing about Kaguya casting Infinite Tsukiyomi in this moment, and that is the fact that Kaguya didn't wipe out the entire Earth with Infinite Tsukiyomi. And based off everything we know about divine trees and how they work, the fact that that divine tree was able to create a chakra fruit that didn't take the entire chakra of Earth is odd. But it's not odd if you take into consideration the fact that this divine tree was made only using half an Otsutsuki. And that is the moment we need to talk about, the creation of this malformed divine tree. See, if we combine the information we have from both Naruto and Boruto, we know that all the matter on a planet, be it living or dead, is added into a chakra fruit's power, which is why Earth has been so desirable for the 3 separate rounds of Otsutsuki who have come there. And thus, the chakra fruit that Kaguya consumed had chakra and power from Shibai, as he most likely ascended prior to Kaguya and Ishiki getting there and presumably on Earth, and therefore his body was there. And thus, Kaguya ate a malformed chakra fruit that contained the chakra of Shibai, but only half. And Kaguya consuming half the power of Shibai would explain some things, like the fact that Kaguya is the only Otsutsuki we've ever seen awaken a Rinne Sharingan, which is objectively the strongest dojutsu in existence except for the Jogan. Possibly. We don't really know how powerful the Jogan is, but Momoshiki seems more interested in the Jogan than the Rinne Sharingan. And this theory speculates that the reason that Kaguya awoke a Rinne Sharingan is because she only consumed half of Shibai's power, and thus she was gifted the dojutsu below the Jogan in terms of power. Kind of like how the descendant of Kaguya, Hagoromo, received the dojutsu below the Rinne Sharingan, the Rinnegan, and the descendant of Hagoromo received the dojutsu below the Rinnegan, the Sharingan. And if you think about it, in all of these scenarios, technically these generations are receiving exactly half the power of their parent. And while that's not technically how genetics works, within the confines of the Naruto universe, it is. So Kaguya receiving a dojutsu one lower on the rung than the Jogan after consuming half the power of Shibai aligns perfectly with everything else we know about dojutsus and how they're passed on through generations. This also explains why Kaguya is the only being to ever independently awaken a Rinne Sharingan. Obviously, other people have awoken a Rinne Sharingan, but those people awoke a Rinne Sharingan because they were channeling Kaguya's power. Madara is who we're talking about here. But now, the most important takeaway from all of this is the word half. Kaguya used half of Ishiki to create the divine tree that contained Shibai's power, and that half is now rearing its ugly head in Boruto. See, if we do assume that Kaguya consumed a chakra fruit that contained half of Shibai's power, that means that Shibai's power and chakra flows through all of humanity, as Kaguya is essentially the mother of all modern ninja, which means that those who are able to gain genetic similarity with Kaguya are in a sense gathering the DNA and chakra of Shibai, as it was Shibai's power that granted Kaguya chakra in the first place. And who is the most genetically and chakra-ly similar person to Kaguya we've ever seen in the Naruto universe? Boruto and Himawari. See, if Boruto was the child of Naruto and Sasuke, like the community wanted, then he would essentially be Hagoromo, as his parents would be an Indra and an Ashura reincarnation. And for years, I and many other people have been saying that if Boruto and Sarada had a child, their child would have the genetic makeup of the three major clans that split off from Hagoromo and Hamura, that being the Uchiha, the Senju, and the Hyuga. And thus, since that child would have the genetic makeup of the three major clans from Hagoromo and Hamura, they would in essence have the chakra and genetic makeup of Hagoromo and Hamura combined, which is Kaguya. Sort of. It's like half of Kaguya. But that's too far down the line, because we already have somebody who has the genetic and chakra makeup of Kaguya born right now. See, because instead of Boruto possibly tying his lineage to Hagoromo if Naruto and Sasuke were his dads, Boruto can now, because of the last, tie his lineage directly to Kaguya, as Naruto received chakra from Hagoromo in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, and Hinata received chakra from Hamura in the last to destroy the Tenseiga, which means that Boruto's parents, when together, represent both Hamura and Hagoromo, the two original sons of Kaguya, brought back together, but in a way that they couldn't be together 2,000 years ago because they didn't live in Alabama. I actually don't know if Alabama would be a big fan of that. I wonder if Alabama draws the line at incest when it comes to gay incest. Now, somewhat conveniently, Hagoromo and Hamura's biggest feat when it comes to their lifetime was sealing away Kaguya using the Sun and Moon Seal, also known as Six Paths Chibaku Tensei. And the Sun and Moon symbology dominates Boruto, and thus to say that Hamura is the moon, I mean, he literally populated it, and Hagoromo is the sun, is not crazy. In fact, that's the symbology they're supposed to represent. And thus Boruto, who is technically the representation of the sun and the moon seal coming together, is a representation of the seal that sealed Kaguya, and is therefore as genetically and chakrally as similar as anybody has ever been to Kaguya, since Hagoromo and Hamura, obviously. But one can make the argument that technically Boruto is more similar to Kaguya than either Hagoromo or Hamura, as very clearly both Hagoromo and Hamura awoke different parts of Kaguya, and thus the combination of their chakra and possibly genetics coming together to make Boruto would give Boruto more overlap with Kaguya than just one of them. And thus the real reason that Boruto shows signs of being tied to Shibai isn't because of his actions or Amado's actions, but Kaguya's. And it's at this point that we circle back to that all-important word that we highlighted earlier: half. See, the idea of half is actually very important in Boruto. When Boruto or Kawaki activate their karma marking, it takes over half of their body. They only manifest half of the horns of the Otsutsuki they're channeling, and especially in Boruto's case, a Jogan only manifests on half of his face, specifically his right half. And now, we've never really stopped to ask the question, why does Boruto only manifest one Jogan? It's not like there's another dojutsu that's taking up his other eye, like Ishiki. Boruto just has a regular eye in his left eye and a Jogan in his right. And while some of you might say, well, that's because the Jogan's on his karma marking side, Boruto had access to the Jogan before Momoshiki joined his body party. So the manifestation of one Jogan specifically has nothing to do with Momoshiki or the karma marking. So it has to do with something in Boruto's genetic makeup, something that's been with him his whole life. And thus, the real reason that Boruto only has one Jogan and has a clear connection to Shibai is Kaguya, and the fact that he represents the most genetic similarity a human has ever had to her. But this leaves us with the lingering question, why would Kaguya, who supposedly consumed a chakra fruit that contained Shibai's power, not awaken a Jogan, and Boruto, who's genetically diluted 2,000 years from Kaguya, would? Well, there's a precedent for things like this. See, we learned from the last that sometimes Otsutsukis literally need human intervention to unlock the highest versions of their eyes, which showed us that the only way that an Otsutsuki is ever able to unlock the highest version of the Byakugan, the Tenseigan, is to pluck out their own Byakugan and replace them with the Byakugan of a human from the Hyuga family, which was odd, but it set the precedent for the fact that Otsutsukis and humans can be codependent on each other for power, which kind of makes sense when you consider the fact that all humans are inherently part Otsutsuki, and thus the combination of human blood and Otsutsuki blood has been for a long time set up to make both parties stronger. And these kinds of hints are everywhere, not just in the Tenseigan. Look at Kawaki, for example. Kawaki, who now is able to wield the karma marking without Shibai's soul inside of it, has already been shown to be able to pull things off with the dojutsu that he got from Ishiki that even Ishiki couldn't do, as Ishiki was very notably not able to pull people into the Daikoku-ten, while Kawaki can. Shibai rather blatantly tells everybody that the only things he's able to shrink are inanimate objects and himself, meaning that the people battling against him don't have to worry about being shrunk. Shibai also states that the things that he's able to alter the size of, he's able to store away in a pocket dimension known as the Daikoku-ten, which implies to us that Shibai wasn't able to seal away humans in the Daikoku-ten because he couldn't augment the size of living beings. However, Kawaki, before he even unlocked all the 8 spokes on his Dharma wheel, showed us that he was able to store away humans in the Daikoku-ten, specifically Naruto and Hinata, something that presumably Ishiki would have done to either Naruto or Sasuke during one of their fights. So what if the reason that Kawaki is able to store away humans in the Daikoku-ten when Ishiki wasn't able to is because the combination of Otsutsuki powers and human blood upgrades those powers? And the logic behind Boruto being able to awaken a Jogan when Kaguya couldn't is exactly the same. Kaguya's DNA and chakra signature, when recreated in a human, Boruto, gave the necessary mixture of DNA to pull out the entirety of Shibai's power, the Jogan, but only half of it, because remember, Kaguya made the divine tree with half of Ishiki's body, which is why Boruto only got one Jogan. And if we continue with this logic, it explains why humans like Daemon and Ada are compatible with Shibai's Shinjutsu, because they are inherently genetically similar to Shibai through their connection to Kaguya. And this could doubly show why Otsutsuki are so interested in Earth, because not only is Shibai's dead body present somewhere on the planet, but Shibai's chakra and blood pumps through every living being on Earth, which could also help explain why humans are able to scale to the level of Otsutsuki. Because for all intents and purposes, everything we know about the Otsutsuki paints them as insanely powerful aliens who have dusted through entire universes like it's nothing. Momoshiki, objectively the 3rd strongest Otsutsuki we know about, has consumed at least 15 planets. And while there's the possibility that Momoshiki is consuming barren, lifeless planets, that doesn't make a huge amount of sense. There has to be fauna and living beings on these planets to produce a chakra fruit worth eating. And yet every single Otsutsuki who's ever made their way to Earth, after Kaguya, of course, has struggled and failed to make a chakra fruit from Earth. And the fact that that struggle came after Kaguya, who was the mother of all modern ninjas, and possibly injected Shibai's chakra and blood into all of humanity by having children, would show that humanity is technically the second rising of the Otsutsuki clan through Shibai. But no human on Earth shares more similarity with Kaguya, and therefore Shibai, than Boruto and Himawari, which is why Momoshiki is so interested in Boruto and why Daemon is so interested in Himawari, as both of them may be able to achieve the highest level of dojutsu on both differing branches of dojutsu. Himawari unlocking the Tenseigan, and Boruto unlocking the Jogan, which would lead to essentially the both of them assuming the roles of Otsutsuki gods on Earth, all because Shibai decided to leave his body behind on Earth. And that, to me, ladies and gentlemen, sounds bulletproof. But if you guys have a better explanation for how Boruto has a possible connection to Shibai, please tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go get my heart rate over 200 BPM.